Well, kia ora koutou and welcome to this webinar today on the 30th of January. Thank you for making time to come in, listen and hang out today. What we are planning on doing is I'll talk for a little bit about the difference between digital fluency and digital technologies, and then I'll have an opportunity to ask some questions in the chat. I am muting you, so if you talk, I won't be able to hear you. Sorry about that. But if you can, just put the any questions that you have in the chat, and I'll answer them at the end. So, as I said, today we're looking at digital fluency, the difference between digital fluency and digital technologies, and some of the implications that has for teaching the new digital technologies curriculum in the coming year, and indeed in 2020 when it's going to be compulsory in schools. I'm Michael. I work for TTS. My background is in primary teaching. I taught intermediate right down to year 1 and 2s over my 10-year career teaching, and then I moved to TTS, and now I do professional learning in schools, work on a digital online software, and sorry, I'm just muting people. And I also like to get out and just see what's happening in schools and keeping up to date with what people are doing in their classrooms. So what I would really like is, let's just make a start. People will be joining. If I do just stop talking a little bit, it's because I'm making sure people are muted as they come in. Otherwise, I will get distracted with the noises, and there's only one person's voice that I like the sound of, and that's mine today. So digital fluency, what is it? Digital fluency can sort of be summed up like any sort of fluency, and it's the ability to understand and select and use the technology that's available. It's the ability to think about and evaluate technology, and it's the ability to communicate with others effectively using the technology. So in a nutshell, that's what digital fluency is. But what it means for students is that they not only are being given a technology to use, that they know what that technology is used for. And it's not necessarily tool specific. It's often the skills that go around using technology. So being able to open a new document, for example, is a skill that goes across many different programs. Being able to turn a device on isn't just because they know how to use a specific device. It's a skill that they can use across a variety of devices. They also understand that the technology that they're using is going to either make their life easier or more efficient, or do something that they couldn't have done without that technology. What we also want students to be doing is evaluating the technology that they're using. So sometimes they'll be having to do a task, and the tool that they're using they might find isn't as practical or as efficient as they'd like, and so they can evaluate that and think of how they'd improve the technology or work to find a technology that's best going to, or better going to, meet the needs that they have. Now the final one is the ability to communicate with others effectively. Now that's all about that's all about the ability to share their learning and share what they're doing using the tools that are available to them. So whether that's posting online, whether it's emailing, whether it's text messaging, whatever it is that the technology is, it's the ability to communicate what they're learning with other people. So digital fluency, as I kind of compare it to learning to write, that a 5-year-old isn't going to be a novelist in their first week of school, but they are going to start learning the fundamentals to being a really good writer, and that is things like they need to be able to form their letters. They need to recognise that letters make up words. They need to realise that words make up sentences. Sentences can be put into paragraphs. Paragraphs can be put into chapters. And then chapters are organised in a way that allows them to tell the story that they're trying to share. And then you've got the micro skills of punctuation and creating suspense and all of those sorts of things that comes with writing. So once they're fluent in writing, then they can learn to structure their writing in a way that they can become a novelist. And I think we've got to think about technology in a very similar way, that when they first get to school, we've got to start teaching them how to handwrite. And so that might be the micro skills involved in taking a photo, for example, that it's not just this, you push the button and you look at the picture that you want to take and then you've got a photo. It's about, making sure you're framing it correctly, making sure you're storing it somewhere, able to transfer it from the device that you took it on into the place that you want to share it or communicate it with others. It's looking at things like, are we doing a wide shot, and using the language of taking photos while we're doing it. So it's really important that digital fluency stuff happens right from day one at school. So when they're on technology, that we're not just throwing them technology and expect them to be able to do it, that we've got to teach it, and we've got to deliberately teach it, deliberately plan for it, and make sure it's happening. Now, the question I pose now, though, is to get students to be digitally fluent, must we as teachers be digitally fluent? And that's often one of those sort of catch-22s. And one of my pet frustrations in school, when I go into schools, is that we refer to our students, or have in the past, as being digitally native or digital natives. And that means that they know more than I do because they've grown up with technology. And I kind of, it frustrates me a little bit, because that doesn't mean that we don't have to teach it. And I don't think students are digitally fluent. They might be able to swipe and find and do what they think is necessary on a device to meet their immediate needs. Sorry, I've just got a bit of feedback on where that was. Found it. Is that they get students to be digitally fluent, we've got to deliberately teach them the skills. So we can't just expect that because they know how to swipe on a device when they get to school, that means they know what that means. And we, as teachers, we need to be making sure we know what it is that we want them to learn, the skills that we want them to learn to become digitally fluent, or digitally to master the digital fluency skills. As teachers, often we don't know the tools that we're going to use all that well. And so we've got to upskill ourselves as well. And that just means that we've just got to be a step ahead. And it's about breaking down the skills that we want them to learn, that they are skills, they're not tools. So we've got to move away from going, I'm going to teach them about iPads, for example, or I'm going to teach them about using Google Docs. So these are the skills I want them to learn that are transferable to other areas or other tools that they might be using. So if it's to, for example, we want them to be publishing work to be able to be shared on a class blog, and they're using, for example, Google Docs for that. The skills might be, micro skills might be choosing a font size that is going to be easily read once it's shared. It might be choosing a font that is easily read by other people. It might be about the formatting of the page so that it's either in columns, or it's a single column, or it is centered, or it's not centered, or it's justified left, or it's justified right, whatever the skills are that we want them to be doing. And then we've got to actively teach those skills so that the next time that they're doing it, we don't have to teach that skill, and we can think of the next time I want them to be able to insert a picture. And if we want them to insert a picture, then they need to know the skills around that. So where do they find the picture? Are they searching for a picture? When they're putting the picture in, are they having the text wrap around it, or are they having it with a hard break at the end of the image so that the text drops to the next line? And it's those micro skills that we want them to be learning to become digitally fluent. Now, when I say that they need to be deliberate and planned, it's also that the technology that we're choosing to put in front of our students needs to meet a need or a purpose in our teaching and learning programs. That it's the tool we're using isn't necessarily the latest and the shiniest new toy, but that we've identified what the need is for our class or for our group of learners, and we're choosing a tool that's going to meet that need. And it's going to enhance the other areas of the curriculum that we're deliberately teaching for. And so the technology is an enhancement, not a replacement of the teacher. It's not a replacement for the other good teaching and learning that happens in the classroom. What I also think is that when we deliberately plan for these micro lessons in digital fluency, what we're doing is we're encouraging ourselves to think about what it is that we want to put in front of our students. And it's not just an afterthought of, oh, they've read this book and now they're going to go and complete this on the iPad or complete this on a computer. So my teaching might come to, I've taught this in reading, and now I've put my students down to teach them micro skill that I want them to develop in the follow-up activity. And that lesson might be a 2-minute, 1-minute, 2-minute, 3-minute lesson on how to insert a picture into a doc, for example. So those little micro lessons need to be deliberately planned for, otherwise they just become incidental and we don't create a progression from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, because we might still be doing the same follow-up activities, which is completely legitimate, but not noticing that we've got a progression because we haven't deliberately planned for that teaching and learning as we go through. One of the other things that I want you to ask is, ask yourself, why am I using this tool? How is it enhancing the teaching and learning in my class? And then what skills need to be taught to allow students to access the tool? Now, though, if you ask those 3 questions every time you do one of the micro lessons that you're going to do in your classrooms, then I think that what you'll be doing is you'll be noticing that there is a definite transference of knowledge across different programs and across different tools that you'll use, but also that the skills that they're learning, you'll start to recognize that they can be used in various areas of the curriculum. So what I taught, this is what you might think to yourself, is I taught them how to take photos because we wanted to do a language experience and we wanted those photos to follow up with their writing. But then what you might realize is I've taught them those micro skills, so I know that in maths I can do a follow-up activity where they're taking photos of their learning or recording their learning using photography, that I don't need to teach them those skills anymore. So there's that transference of what taking a good photo looks like across into other areas of the curriculum. Right. So I would aim for at least 1 2 to 3 minute digital lesson per day. And it seems like that there isn't a lot of time to do that. But don't do it with the whole class, because like in any area of the curriculum, every student doesn't need to be learning the same skills at the same pace at the same time. So when I say it could be part of the reading, maths or writing lesson, it could be just 1 minute of your group work that you're sitting down with your group where they've got the devices in front of them and you go, this is the skill I want you to learn, and it's deliberately planned for. But you could also do it for specific needs-based groups. So you might recognize that there's a group of students who you're planning on working with them in the future to create, for example, the Fair Go Ad Awards, and they're going to be working on that later in the year. And you want to build up to that point where they can do that independently or with a mentor, that you might be thinking, right from day 1 of the year, this is the skills that I want them to have by then. And so I'm going to work with them on a daily or on a rostered basis where we teach a different skill regularly over the time. I do think it should be a mixture though, that sometimes you're teaching it in math, sometimes you're teaching it in reading, sometimes you're teaching it in writing, sometimes you're doing it on a needs base. But what it always needs to be is always needs to be planned for, that it's not just we're going to do this and I've just thought about, so I better show you how to, because you need to break down those micro skills so that they've got the best opportunity to learn them. So then jumping away from what digital fluency is, and that's been the main track of what I've talked about so far, but digital fluency to me is a prerequisite for accessing the digital technologies curriculum. And the digital technology curriculum, and this is directly from the curriculum, is about teaching students the theory of how technology works and how they can use that technology to solve problems. Now that's really key, because you can start to make those links then between, handwriting is essential for students to be able to write, or knowing that letters make up words and words make up sentences is essential for students to be able to become writers. And it's no different in the digital space, that they need to have those basic digital fluency skills so that they can start accessing how the technology that they're using is working, and using the technology that they've got the skills to use to solve problems. And we can't solve problems if we're still learning the technology or learning the steps. The digital technologies curriculum is broken up into two strands. I'm talking about in the New Zealand curriculum document. Hangarai Matihiko is slightly different, and that's in Te Marautanga or Aotearoa. If you want to talk about that, then I'm more than happy to take an email from you and we can have a one-on-one conversation, but I am just talking about the English medium document at the minute. The two strands are computational thinking and designing and developing digital outcomes. They're very different. Computational thinking is that process-driven thinking, and how am I going to use that sort of thinking to make life a bit better. The design and developing digital outcomes is looking at using the tools that I've got to present my learning in ways that I couldn't do without a digital tool. Now, digital technologies, it's really important when you're teaching this that it's not taught in isolation. So I was saying, do those micro lessons, but when they're solving problems, they need to be in meaningful context. So they've got the digital fluency, and we teach handwriting in isolation. And I'll just go back to that, or basic facts in mathematics is taught in isolation. And then we pull it into the real life context to use those skills that we've developed. So that's the same with digital technologies. They've got those digital fluency skills. Then in a meaningful context, whether that's in English, or if it's in social science or sciences or health and PE or the arts, that they're looking at using the technologies that they now understand and use in ways that are meaningful in solving problems, or best supporting the learning in those other curriculum areas. So, and they have to be meaningful contexts, that we don't want to force these contexts and go, oh, it'd be really good if we could do some coding. That would be tool-based, and as I said earlier, we shouldn't be teaching tools, we should be teaching skills. So what would be a good topic to do that? I think you need to go the other way, and you need to look at your curriculum and go, these are the areas or the topics or the themes that we've got, where our inquiries for the year, and go, where does computational thinking naturally fit in to what I'm doing? And then once you've pulled that out, you go, and how is that teaching and learning going to be enhanced by the introduction of the digital technologies curriculum into that learning area? It's really important, important's the wrong word. I had a lot of fun. I was working with a school, and I used the Wonky Donkey book as an example of the crossover between literacy and computational thinking. Now, Wonky Donkey is a fun story to read, and it would be one that I would choose to read to and talk with my junior students, sort of 0 to 4 maybe. And the students love it. It's got that rhyme, and it's got rhythm in it, and it's all those great things for literacy. But then I looked at it from a digital technologies point of view and thought about it as an input and output. So the input was that the donkey has no leg, or only 3 legs, and the output is that he's a wonky donkey. So being able to use that language of the digital technologies, or of computational thinking, that there's an input and an output. The next input is that he's only got one eye, so he's a winky wonky donkey, and that's the inputs are he's got 3 legs and 1 eye, so he becomes a winky wonky donkey. And so taking that teaching that you're already doing, or those contexts that you're already using, and looking at technology curriculum or the digital technologies curriculum and going, how can I meaningfully integrate the language of, or the ideas and skills of, into those lessons? And then the students can start to see that this stuff isn't just one-offs, that it's everywhere in their lives. And that's what we want them to start thinking, because that is the reality, that I don't know the difference really between checking a message on my phone or checking an email on my computer or having a conversation. That they're all forms of communication, and in different contexts a different form is the most appropriate. And being able to make those choices for myself, because I understand all the technologies that I'm using, that quite often it's easier for me to just yell across the room at a colleague and say, have you seen, or have you got, or can we do, or whatever, than it would be to write out a big email, send it to them, hope that they're connected to the email at the time, and then wait for their response. And it's been to make the choice which technology or no technology is the most appropriate for the purpose that I'm doing at the time. So, a lot of talking from Michael right then. So, in summary, digital fluency, I think, as I said, is a prerequisite for digital technologies. I don't think the tools matter that much, and it's the thinking and it's the problem solving that's important. We often get hung up on the tools, and we get dazzled by the latest and greatest toy that comes out, whether that's the new robot kit or whether it's the latest software that's been released by some group. What we need to start doing is, when we're planning for these hardware and software purchases, we need to think about our teaching and learning throughout the year. Not, we'll buy this tool because I think it's going to be a great way to enhance teaching and learning in my school, but without the forward thinking but where is it going to fit in? And one of my biggest messages to schools is that digital technology shouldn't become or be an extra in the classrooms. That it is a really good way of enhancing what's already going on and all the really great stuff that's happening in our classrooms across Aotearoa, New Zealand. That was my last slide. So what I'm going to do is if you've got a question, then do pop it in the chat. I'm going to read those out and answer them as best I can. The email invitation for today's webinar came from my email address, so you are more than welcome to email me. I can quite happily give you a call. If you're handy, then I'm more than happy to come into schools and have a chat with you. TTS does offer professional learning in both digital fluency and the digital technologies curriculum, so if you want to have a chat about what that looks like, we can help with the process of developing a proposal for the Ministry of Education and going through that process with you. But here we go. Sharing the slides, absolutely. We will send out, because I've recorded this as well, so we will share the slideshow with you, and we'll also share the recording, and do feel free to share that with other people in your school or in your communities, that if you think it will be of value to them, then I'm more than happy for you to take it and distribute it as widely as you like. Just because if you do share it, I'll just say my email address as well. It's michael.richards@tts.co.nz, and so then anyone that's listening to this that didn't get my email can now email me, and that'll tick the box for the boss. Any other questions? No, I'll just sit around here for a little bit longer. I can see some people are dropping off, which is not a problem. I know you're busy people. Thank you very much for your time today. I do really appreciate that you have come at the start of your year. I wish you all the best for term 1 and the rest of 2019. It was one of my favourite times of the year, starting with a new class and getting to know all those new little faces. So I'm a little bit jealous that you get to do it. But ngā mihi nui, kia koutou, talk to you all soon.
What about pedagogy in a collaborative environment? What would it look like?
Oh, good question, Rebecca. So the question from Rebecca was, what about pedagogy in a collaborative environment? What would it look like? Now, my first thing is I've been to quite a few schools that have those collaborative learning environments or modern learning environments or whatever the different schools call them. And often the ones that have got real clear ideas of the pedagogy they're using for all areas of the curriculum integrate digital naturally, and because that is a way of meeting the needs of their pedagogy. But what I would say it would look like is that it would, and it should, once your students are digitally fluent, should become invisible, so that if you've got, say, 90 kids in a collaborative learning space, that you wouldn't notice that those ones are reading a book and those ones are on devices, and that those ones are down with the teacher in a workshop with pen and paper, and those ones are with another teacher with devices, because it would become naturally integrated into your learning space. So what I do think, though, in those collaborative learning environments is that we've just got to be still deliberately teaching for them, that we shouldn't be using them as the babysitter in that space, because they can be quiet. Putting kids on devices with headphones can be really quiet and busy work, and it seems to be a really good way to fill in time. But I would argue that you've got better skills than using them like that. So devices or digital technology in a modern or a collaborative learning space should be used as they are in all areas. There wasn't a very clear answer, so I apologise. Flick me an email and I can talk to you about what it is that you do and how I think that might work.
One more question.
Yeah.
Makerspace seems to be the latest buzzword this year. Do you think digital technologies are a part of this, DJ?
Yeah, I mean, Makerspace, I don't know that all too well, so it hasn't seemed to be one of the words that I've heard a lot of this year, but then I did hide myself in a bubble all over summer. I think that what we do risk in education, and it often happens, is that the latest and greatest do become these fads, and the buzz, when you use the word buzzwords, that is absolutely 100% true, that we get on and we jump on and we latch on to these things. I do think, though, that digital technologies, where it could be, making a buzz of certain things, and there was a time early on where coding became the proxy, or digital technologies became the proxy for, we're going to do coding in our school or have a robotics club, and that really, really scared me and frustrated me, because it's not about that. Like, coding is part of it, absolutely. Robotics, that could be part of it, absolutely. But that's not what it's about. And it's about problem solving, it's about thinking, it's about understanding. And so if we think about the digital technologies curriculum in that way, and when we talk about it in our schools, we talk about it in that way, then hopefully it doesn't become a buzz, it just becomes an integrated part of our school curriculum. And when we start talking about my micro lesson on digital technologies today was around taking photos, and it's going to be all week, and I've got 20 lessons planned, and they're only 1 minute lessons though, so it's only 20 minutes of my week that I'm dedicating to this, but I know that that's actually going to have a flow and effect throughout my year of integrating digital technologies into my classroom. So yeah, if digital technologies is part of creating a buzz, like I say, I don't really know what Makerspace means or is, but I will definitely look it up and find out what it is. Then I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. It's exciting to me. Cool. Hey, thanks very much. I will we'll flick off the email with the link to the slides and a link to this recording. And I hope to talk to many of you sometime soon. Ka kite.